صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها المدثر قم فأنذر وربك فكبر وثيابك فطهر والرجز فاهجر ولا تمنن تستكثر ولربك فاصبر. فإذا نقر في الناقور فذلك يومئذ يوم عسير على الكافرين غير يسير. ذرني ومن خلقت وحيدا وجعلت له مالا ممدودا وبنين شهودا ومهدت له تمهيدا ثم يطمع أن أزيد كلا إنه كان لآياتنا عنيدا سأرهقه صعودا إنه فكر وقدر فقتل كيف قدر ثم قتل كيف قدر ثم نذر ثم عبس وبصر ثم أدبر واستكبر فقال إن هذا إلا سحر يؤثر إن هذا إلا قول بشر سأصليه سقر وما أدراك ما سقر لا تبقي ولا تذر لواحة للبشر عليها 19. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Thank you all for coming tonight. We're lucky to have with us tonight our dear guest scholar, Maulana Syed Hussain Rizvi. He is visiting from New Jersey. The name of the 3-part series, which will go on till Saturday inshallah, is Modesty During Immodest Times. Please help me to welcome him up with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. ولعنة الله على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل نعم المولى ونعم النصير. السلام عليك يا مولاي يا سيدي يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعل الله الآخر أهدي مني لزيارتكم. Everyone together. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. It is an honor and privilege to be amongst you in these nights as we approach the Arba'een of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. We gather here to remember, to honor, to learn from the seerah, the life of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein, to learn of his fada'il, his merits, to learn of his masa'ib, his tragedies, his pains, his agonies that he went through in order for one purpose, and that is to reach nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Especially as the Ahl Haram, they move from Karbala to Kufa and then from Kufa to Sham, and then once they reach their freedom, they come and make their way back to Karbala. We come to Imam Hussein, we come to this majlis, we come to this Farsh Aza in order to show our loyalty, in order to show our attachment to Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. And it is an honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He bestowed that we are able to attend. There are many who have this modified or in-depth recognition who Imam Hussain stood for. But Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that honor. Allah has given us that honor. He's given us that blessing, and He's given us that ma'rifat of knowing who He is. And this is something which is a great gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be under the wilaya of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. It is probably one of the most cherished things that we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we come to these majalis, when we come to these gatherings, when we congregate, when we assemble and we cry for Abi Abdullah al-Hussain, this is something which has a direct effect on our spirituality. And this is something which directly is going to affect us in the akhirah. It's something when the angels, when they come down and when they descend upon the earth and they go in these gatherings where Imam Hussain is remembered, and they return back to the heavens, the other angels, they ask, what is this fragrance which is coming from you? This beautiful smell which is coming from you. And they said that we went to the ziyarat, we went to the gathering where Imam Hussain was remembered. And so these are cherished moments that we will have. And this is a form of loyalty and allegiance that we have to the Ahlul Bayt. Till the last of our breaths, we will always remember Hussain, and we will always cry for Abi Abdullah al-Hussain. And in doing so, we reach the objective of our life. In remembering Abi Abdullah and crying for Abi Abdullah, in learning those lessons from Abi Abdullah al-Hussain, it brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a hadith al-Qudsi, He says, Yabna Adam, that O son of Adam, khalaqtul ashya'a li ajlik. I created everything in this universe, I created it for you. Everything that we see in this earth, everything that we have, the bounties that we have in this earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given it to us. He's placed it in our disposal for us to use. وَخَلَقْتُكَ لِأَجْلِ. And I created you, human beings. I created you, the human species, for what purpose? لِأَجْلِ. So that you may come to me, you may come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He created us so that we can get recognition of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we come to Ahlul Bayt because by us attaching ourselves to Ahlul Bayt, we get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our emphasis on Ahlul Bayt is why? Our emphasis on this love for the Ahlul Bayt, on this remembrance of Ahlul Bayt, is for what reason? It's because it directly brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a sign of Iman. The Prophet has said that inna liqatl Hussain hararatan fi qulubil mu'minin. That in the killing, in Imam Hussain being slayed, there is a warmth in the heart of the believers. The more we remember Imam Hussain, the more we cry for Imam Hussain, that's a sign of higher Iman. That's a sign of higher faith and piety of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more we get closer to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, the more we get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is something which then reflects into our actions. This is something which then affects in our behavior and how we interact with other people. One of the beautiful examples of this, which is really, it's a living miracle. The more closer a person gets to the Ahlul Bayt, the better their akhlaq becomes. If we look at what's happening in Iraq, as we're approaching the days of Arba'een, you see the karam, you see the generosity, you see the open-handedness of Iraqis. Where is this coming from? This is coming from because they're getting closer to Imam Hussain. They're going to Karbala. They're walking from long distances. As they get closer to Ahlul Bayt, what happens? Their akhlaq also improves. Their open-handedness, their generosity, their khidmah, their service to other people, it automatically goes up. And that's what we see in Iraq, this miracle which is there. More than 20 million people who are coming to a small city, which has very limited resources, but 20 million people are coming, more than 20 million people are coming, and they're being taken care of. They have a place to sleep, they have food to eat, they have the facilities, they can go and do whatever they need to do in terms of their prayer and worship. The closer we get to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, the closer we get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it's important for us to remember that the Ahlul Bayt are there for this purpose. These gatherings, these majalis that we have, they directly link us and connect us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This era, this period of time that we are living in, it's a very turbulent era. In this era in which is filled with many different problems, many different challenges that we face in our lives. This era, this period of time, it's a very difficult segment of life to live in because we see that there are so many factors that are detrimental to our faith. And not only there are so many factors, but these factors have now become much more accessible. We were talking with a couple of friends and, we were in this discussion that we had, we said that when we were children, when we get exposed to certain things, most of the time those things of indecency, those things of haram were outside of the house. Those who grew up in the 90s and the 80s, right? We didn't have much access to haram because internet and computer, tablets, these things we didn't have access to. But the situation has changed so quickly that all of this vulgarity and profanity and these items of indecency, now they're very much accessible. Now they're inside of our house. Now they're inside of our homes. Now they're literally in our palms. Within a matter of seconds, we can go and we can access these things which bring us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not only that, but we live in challenging times because this is a time of mass confusion. Right now, there's indoctrination which is going on. There's brainwashing which is going on. There's relentless propaganda which is starting from a very young age to get people to think in a certain way in order to move people away from a lifestyle of godliness, a lifestyle of righteousness, into a life of immorality. And so we, living in this country, living in this time, we see some very disturbing developments which have happened. One of the developments that have happened is that this collective reasoning of humanity is no longer there, where they can apply their intellect on a collective level and determine what is good and what is bad. Right now we live in a time where a person can go and pretend to be something, and now we also have to pretend along with them. They can pretend to identify with a certain attribute or quality or gender, and we also, because they're pretending, we also have to pretend along with them. And if we don't pretend along with them, then somehow this is inequality, this is discrimination, this is racism. We live in these very challenging times where morality is now changing. Morality is now becoming moral relativity, which means that ethics, which means akhlaq, which means morals, are now something which fluctuate with time, with age, with location. Whereas in our belief, in our faith, we don't have this. We don't have this idea. We believe that ethics and morality, that they're fixed, regardless of the time, the era, the country that we live in. Halal Muhammad, halal abadan ila yawm al-qiyamah. That whatever is permissible, whatever is allowed, whatever is wajib from the religion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alayhi is halal till the day of judgment. Wa haramu Muhammadun haramun abada ila yawm al-qiyamah. And the haram, those things which are forbidden by the religion of Islam, is forbidden till the end of time, till the day of judgment. But we're living in a day and age where these concepts that are there, they're now being switched. What is good is now being looked at as evil. What is evil is now being looked at as good. And so these are difficult times because how do we process these things? How do we approach these things so that we avoid confusion? And especially for the younger generation who are growing up in this environment, how they avoid this type of confusion. There's a beautiful hadith where a couple of companions, when they come to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alayhi, and the Prophet, he talks to them about Akhir Zaman. He talks to them about a period of time which causes a lot of disturbance in these companions who were there. He says to them, كَيْفَ بِكُمْ إِذَا فَسَدَتْ نِسَاءَكُمْ وَفَسَقَ شَبَابَكُمْ. What will happen to you when a time comes, إِذَا فَسَدَتْ نِسَاءَكُمْ, when the women, when they become corrupt, وَفَسَقَ شَبَابَكُمْ, in your youth, they now become degenerate. They don't have any morals anymore. وَلَمْ تَأْمُرُوا بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَلَمْ تَنْهَوْا عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. A period of time will come where people will no longer command to do good, where people will no longer prohibit others from doing evil. And so the companion said to the Prophet, وَيَكُونُ ذَلِكَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Will such a time really happen? Will such a time really happen where people won't command others to do good, won't prevent others from doing evil? And so the Prophet, he says, نَعَمْ وَشَرُّ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. Yes, the situation will be worse than that. فَكَيْفَ بِكُمْ إِذَا أَمَرْتُمْ بِالْمُنْكَرِ وَنَهَيْتُمْ عَنِ الْمَعْرُوفِ. And then the Prophet, what does he say? He said, a time will come where people will command others to go and do munkar, to go and do evil, to go and do actions which are wicked. وَنَهَيْتُمْ عَنِ الْمَعْرُوفِ. And when it comes to something which is good, they will tell people that don't go and engage in this good act. Faqila, they said to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, وَيَكُونَ ذَلِكَ, will such a time come? And then the Prophet says, Naam, شَرٌ مِّن ذَلِكَ, it will be more evil than that. فَكَيْفَ بِكُمْ إِذَا رَأَيْتُمُ الْمَعْرُوفُ مُنْكَرًا وَالْمُنْكَرْ مَعْرُوفًا. He says, he predicts a time will come where people, they will see ma'ruf, they will see good as munkar. وَيَرَوْنَ الْمَعْرُوفُ مُنْكَرًا, and they will see that which is evil as good. So what's going to happen at the end of time is that there's going to be a conceptual basis, a conceptual change of what is good and evil. Those two concepts will become so mixed up that people will not be able to determine what is good and what is evil. Not only will it be misunderstood, but it will be intentionally misconstructed. So people cannot make a judgment between that which is good and between that which is evil. And this is something which we see in our days and in our lives. We see that virtues like, for example, honesty. Virtues like honesty are no longer valued. People, they say that if you want to get ahead in life, you can't be an honest person. You gotta lie, you gotta pad your resume, you gotta add certain things, right? Because if you don't do it, well, you're not gonna get ahead, you're not gonna be successful. If a person chooses to be honest, if a person chooses to be straightforward, they say, oh, he's a simpleton. Oh, he's somebody who doesn't live with the times. He's not somebody who's adaptable. They say if you want to get ahead, you have to evolve. You have to adapt. You have to cut corners. You have to be manipulative. Right? We see these concepts, they're changing right in front of us. We see, for example, if a person chooses not to go and engage in certain types of behavior, in terms of interactions with the opposite gender, whether it's handshaking or hugging or whatever these type of things, they think that there's something wrong with that person. They think that there's a psychological issue with that type of a person. If a person chooses to go and live a lifestyle of righteousness, they think that that person is backward. They think that the person is archaic. They think that the person, there's issues that are there in that person. So we live in a day and age where society has deviated so much that the fitrat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put within us, it has become latent. It has become disengaged. That if you don't engage in these types of behaviors, people, they begin to judge you. And this is what we see, that the Prophet saying, رَأَيْتُمُ الْمَعْرُوفُ مُنْكَرًا, that you will see good as evil and you will see evil as good. One of those concepts that has changed its course is this concept of haya. In English, haya is translated as modesty, is translated as being shameful, as humility. However, inshallah, in these next 3 lectures, I don't want to use too much English because it's important that we raise our understanding to the understanding how Islam was delivered. In college, I took this course, linguistic course. And it was the only linguistic course I took. And the reason why I took it was because, we heard of Noam Chomsky and that he's, a linguist at, MIT. So what is this subject about? So I said, let me just take a linguistic course. It was elective, so I just took it. So there was this one very interesting theory which was mentioned in that course. And that theory is called the Sapir-Whorf theory. And that hypothesis which is there, it says that the structure of a language determines a person's perception, view, and experience in life. So what does that mean? That means that when you go and when you learn a certain language, that language will now shape how you see the world around you. So for example, someone in India or Pakistan, they speak Urdu. Urdu has a certain impact upon them which directly affects their worldview. Somebody who is in Iraq, learning Arabic, speaking Arabic, living in an Arabic environment, right? What's happening is that Arabic language has a certain structure which then impacts how the person sees their life. And so us living here in America, living and speaking in English language, the way that we look at our society is very much deeply impacted by our language. And so one of the important factors for shaping our worldview is the language that we utilize. And so we know that Islam is closely associated with the Arabic language. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose that the Arabic language should be the medium in which the final message should be revealed to all of mankind. And so we have to try to understand Islam from the Arabic language, right? I remember, the first year I was in Hosea. It was the first couple of months. And we were learning Farsi. And we had one of the teachers who used to come in. And he used to give us a dars-e-akhlaq. And it was just a couple of weeks there. And so he used to come and he used to give us dars-e-akhlaq in English. Ustad Mujahidi, a very nice, very simple man, very learned man. And so he was emphasizing this point. He was saying, now that you've come to the Hosea, now you're coming to learn Islam through Arabic or learn Islam through Farsi, because these are Islamic languages. And he said, don't learn Islam through your own language, through English. So we're like, oh, what's wrong with English? You know, this is the language that we grew up with. And he was emphasizing this point. And the reason he said was because when you look and you try to understand Islam through English, you're going to bring your own language, you're going to bring your own culture, you're going to bring your own values, and it's an impact how you see Islam. And you don't want to do that. You want to understand Islam, how Islam was delivered by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So some of the students, they were, a bit hesitant to accept what he was saying. And so he continued. He was saying, this language English that you speak, this language English has its own culture. And certain parts of your language directly contradict Islam. And so don't use that. And so then he asked us a question. He said, what is the one word in English that no matter where you place it in the sentence is always capitalized? So you're like, I don't know, what words it's always capitalized. And he said the word I. He said the word I, regardless of where you place it in a sentence, it's always about me, it's always about I, it's always big, it's always capitalized. Whereas Islam is not like that. Islam is not I-centric. Islam is not about me. Islam is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's about God-centric. It's about being focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you learn when you learn Islam through Arabic or through Farsi, it impacts the way that you understand Islam. So he was emphasizing this point. And so it's important that when we come across these terms, when we come across some of these, concepts, we understand it using the Arabic term, right? And so there's many different examples of how certain words, when we use it in Arabic or in Farsi, it gives one meaning. But if we use it in the English language, it gives us a completely different meaning. For example, huquq. When I say the word huquq, what comes to your mind? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Rights. Rights of, and then which Imam? Imam Sajjad, right? What comes in our mind is huquq, which means in the treatise of rights which Imam has written. And what do we think when we think of the word huquq? When we think of the word huquq, it has a certain connotation that what must I do for others? Huquq al-walidain, huquq al-masjid, huquq al-awlad. What are responsibilities that I must go and fulfill? But if I say the word right, now what happens? Now what my mind is going to, what about me? What do I have the right to do? This is my right. I have the ability to do this. I can dress the way that I want to dress. I can speak the way that I want to speak, right? So even this subtle change which is there, it causes a change in our orientation and understanding of Islam. For example, when I use the word freedom. When I use the word freedom in English, what does it mean? It means I have the freedom and ability to do what I want, to move where I want, to go where I want, to dress the way that I want, to listen to what I want, to live my life the way that I want. But when I know the word in Arabic for freedom is hur or hurriya, what do I think of? It has a completely different connotation. At least in my mind, when I hear the word hur and hurriya, I think of, under Shuhada of Karbala, Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi. Someone who broke the shackles of this dunya and was truly liberated and became closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this point that he was mentioning was that when you try to understand Islam through the Arabic lens or through the Farsi lens. And unfortunately, a lot of these changes now, they're even coming into Islamic languages. Like if I use the word azadi, the word azadi now is, initially it had a very good meaning. But now because of the changes and the cultural, upheaval which is happening there, azadi, the meaning has completely changed. Zan azadi was in the... So we don't want to understand it that way. So we want to make sure that we understand it how? We understand it through the Arabic language. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so this is an important point, that whenever we approach Islam and study Islam, we want to understand Islam by the standard that Islam has set from us. We don't want to degrade Islam. We don't want to bring Islam down and try to fit it into our box, try to fit it into our understanding. And this is a completely wrong approach. And we see that people have done this to Islam. They have a certain understanding and they bring Islam down. They degrade Islam down to their understanding. And what does it result in? It results in deviation. It results in distortion. One of the scholars, he narrates that he went to Hajj and he went to Jannat al-Baqi. And when he went to Jannat al-Baqi, he was doing tawassul, ziyarah to the Ahl Bayt alayhim as-salam. And there's da'is there who come and they say, bid'ah, haram, hada haram, la yu'athir. They come and they antagonize you by saying that this is haram that you're doing, calling out to the Ahlul Bayt. And so he was narrating the story. He said that this da'i, this Salafi da'i came to him and said to him that, what is it that you're going and you're asking for help from these 4 ai that you have over here? Hum mauta. He said, they're all dead. He said, they cannot do anything for you. And so this Wahhabi da'i which was there, he takes a pen and he throws it on the ground. And then he begins to do dua. He says, Ya Zain al-Abidin, i'tuni hadha al-qalam. Ya Muhammad al-Baqir, i'tuni hadha al-qalam. Ya Fatima al-Zahra, i'tini hadha al-qalam. And so he goes on and on and on. And he says, look, all of these people who you're doing dua to, he said, they're all dead. They can't do anything for you. And then he says, I'm alive. See, I can pick up the pen. So I'm alive. Why are you doing dua? Why are you going and doing tawassul with individuals who are dead, who cannot have any effect upon you? And so the sheikh who was there, he asked him, can I see your pen? So he gave him the pen. And so the sheikh throws it down on the ground and he says, Ilahi, i'tuni hadha al-qalam. Oh Allah, give me this qalam, give me this pen. Obviously nothing's going to happen. He said, if you base Islam off of your logic, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also dead. This tawassul, this form of tawassul and intercession that we do with the Ahlul Bayt, it has a different meaning than what you're doing, what you're thinking. The way that you're understanding is completely flawed. These are the means of asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through help. These independently, they don't have anything. And so he explains to him in this very simple manner that your false logic has resulted in a distorted version of Islam. So it's important that if we don't raise ourselves to the level of understanding Islam, the way that Islam is supposed to be understood, the result is going to be what? The result is that we're going to be understanding a deviated form of Islam, a deformed form of Islam, and it's a form of Islam which is no longer nab, which is no longer asil, which is no longer pure. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay, so let's move back to what we were talking about, our subject matter, which is haya. What is haya? What does the word haya mean? When we look in our books of akhlaq, the word haya, the definition which is given, is that haya is a characteristic, a trait which prevents a person from being pulled towards certain acts of indecency. Meaning that a person within themselves, they have this trait which is called haya. And this haya empowers them to keep them away from certain things which are indecent. They have this internal strength, this internal fortitude, this internal tenacity which is there, which gives them the strength to stay away from certain acts of indecency. So for example, if something is filthy, if something is vulgar, what prevents a person from going to it? That's what we call haya. When it comes to, for example, some thought that comes into, for example, a certain, whether it's looking, whether it's listening, where does that strength we stay away from decency? That's called haya. It's called characteristic. It's called haya. It's called haya. Called haya. Haya. A person who has haya, inside of them, what do they have? They have this internal stamina. They have this internal fortitude, this internal resolve that when they see something which is repulsive, they stay away from it. They don't get attracted to it. They don't go in that direction. So for example, when a certain thought comes into their mind, when an obscene thought comes into their mind, they're quickly able to shift their mind to something else. If, for example, an indecent or promiscuous image comes in front of them, the ability to turn away, the ability to walk away, to turn their heads, where does that strength come from? That strength comes from haya. If, for example, if a person goes and judges another person based on their physical features, based on because someone is fat, someone is skinny, someone is dark-skinned, someone is light-skinned, right? The ability to stay away from making those type of character judgments, where does it come from? It comes from haya. When a person is, is listening to something which is haram, some form of haram music, the ability to turn away from that haram music, where does it come from? It comes from this quality which is called haya. And so where does haya, where does it come from? It stems from this ability to see beyond this physical world. When a person sees beyond this physical realm, this material world, and understands that there is a metaphysical realm, understand that there is a world beyond this world, there's an unseen world, they don't get limited. They're not restricted by these things. They're not restricted by the mundane things which are in this dunya. When a person knows that if I look at something haram, when a person knows that I say something which is inappropriate, something which is profane, something which is indecent, that is going to affect me, affect my soul, affect my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it results in haya. So what is haya? Haya is this security mechanism that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in this trait, in this quality that keeps you away from acts of indecency, which keep you away from acts which are evil. There's another word which is synonymous to it, which is called iffa, or a person who has iffa is called afif. And this is a very synonymous word to iffa, to haya. The literal meaning of iffa is the ability to self-restrain oneself, self-control over oneself, self-mastery, self-possession over themselves, to not act upon the whims which come about within us. They're very similar to one another, except that iffa has more of an emphasis when it comes to desires, when it comes to urges that pertain to the mouth and the private parts. That's where iffa is most likely used for. However, in these lectures, we're going to use these interchangeably. But when we look at our hadith, iffa is a higher level than haya. And there's a hadith from the Imam where he says, "Sababul iffa al-haya," that the thing which causes iffa is haya, which means that the more haya a person gets, they're able to reach the next level in akhlaqiyat, which is called iffa. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The opposite of haya, what is it? It's called waqaha. It's called a person who is waqi, which means that a person who is impertinent, a person who goes and easily engages into acts of indecency. A lot of times in our, in the Hawza and in other scholarly circles, the way that we understand things is through the opposite. So if we want to understand hot, we understand hot by cold. When we want to understand tall, we understand it by the opposite, which is short. So haya, what is the opposite of haya? The opposite of haya is called al-waqaha. What is waqaha? Waqaha is a form of insolence. Waqaha is a form of displaying improper etiquette, improper ethics and morals, a type of shamelessness which is inside of a person. And the reason why it's there is because they have this boldness within themselves. They don't have that restraint. They don't have the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what do? They go and they act in a very shameless manner. They go and they act in a very lowly and in a very base manner. It refers to this quality. Waqaha is this quality where there is this type of carelessness, where I don't feel as if I go and do something, indecent, and as if it's not going to have any type of effect upon me, right? A type of insolence which is there, an impudent, which means that a person lacks a shame. A lot of times when they go and they do something bad, afterwards they feel regretful. The reason why they feel regretful is because they have haya within them. But sometimes people, they go and they commit a sin, they go and do something haram, and they feel completely indifferent. Why do they feel indifferent? Because it's a lack of haya. And the Quran gives an example of this, that if a person doesn't have control over themselves, if a person is not able to restrain themselves, and whatever impulses come to their mind, and they speak it, and they say it, and they act upon it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them that they have an intense punishment. And He gives an example in one of the verses of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ فَقِيرٌ وَنَحْنُ أَغْنِيَاءٌ. Sometimes we go and we make judgments about other people, the way that they're dressed, the car that they're driving, the style of their house, and we make judgments about them. That, they may not be, for example, at a high financial status, or they might not be wealthy, right? And so the kuffar, what did they used to do? Of early Islam, they used to say that what? They say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is faqir. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is poor. وَنَحْنُ أَغْنِيَا. And we are the ones who are wealthy. سَنَكْتُبْ مَا قَالُوا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, because of this boldness which you displayed, because of this recklessness which you had, in which you're making a judgment upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you're making a character attribution to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He is poor, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? He says, سَنَكْتُبْ مَا قَالُوا. We will write down what they say. وَنَقُولُ ذُوقُوا عَذَابَ الْحَرِيقِ. And for someone saying such a thing, there is an intense blaze waiting for them. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Just like there is degrees in haya, there are also degrees in waqaha. when it comes to indecency. Sometimes a person, may not say something which is indecent, but a person may go and read those type of things. A person may go and listen to those type of things, right? There are degrees and there are levels of waqaha, and all of those levels we should be trying to stay away from them. This discussion of haya, this discussion of modesty, it's a very sensitive discussion. It has something to do with our, personal beliefs, our personal character traits, right? And it's something which, when a person has haya, it means they have chastity within them. They have this righteousness which is within them. They have this cautiousness within them. They're constantly being aware of what they're doing and what is causing harm to their souls. What I want to do in this next part is look at some of these traditions from the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam where they talk about haya. In this very beautiful tradition, the Prophet says, "Inna li kulli deenin khulaqa," that every religion has certain principles, has certain attributes. Wa khuluqul Islam al haya. And the characteristic, the defining attribute of Islam, what is it? The Prophet says, haya. Salawatullah Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says that the most central attribute, the most central ethical quality in Islam is haya, is modesty. The most salient feature that a believer must have is haya. The defining trait of a moment of a believer is haya. If a person has all of the attributes of Islam when it comes to prayer and fasting and worshiping and doing all of these things, but if a person doesn't have haya, then that person doesn't have Islam, doesn't have the most important feature and characteristic of Islam. And since when a person goes and gets haya, what type of state are they in? A person who has haya, they're constantly self-vigilant. They're constantly monitoring themselves. What is going to affect my spirituality? What is going to affect my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When it comes to our physical bodies, when it comes to our bodily organs, haya is this safety mechanism. Haya is this brake which allows us to not go and pursue those desires that we have, those lowly and those base desires that sometimes they may come within us. If you want to know what is the protection of our religion, what is the protection of our iman, it is haya. The Prophet says this beautiful hadith. He says, Al-Islam uryan, that the religion of Islam is clothless. It doesn't have any covering. But what is its libas? فَلِبَاسُهُ al-haya. The libas of Islam is haya. The clothing, the covering of Islam, what is it? It's haya. Haya is what protects a person. Haya is what beautifies a person. Haya is that attribute which goes and prevents a person from going and committing sins. The reason why we wear clothes is one of the reasons why we wear clothes is because clothes, they go and they protect us. They go and they protect us from the weather, from the cold, from the heat. There's another hadith from Imam Ali where he says, "Ahsanul malabis ad-din," that the best cloth of religion, the best cloth of deen, of your religion of Islam, is al-haya. There's a parallel being drawn between haya and clothing. What does clothing do for us? Clothing gives us protection from the sun, the cold, the heat. What does haya do for us? Haya comes into our lives and it prevents us from falling into sins. One of the reasons why we wear clothing is because we may sometimes have some blemishes. We may have some flaws within our skin, right? So we want to hide those. A person who has haya, what does it do? It allows them to not go and expose their flaws to other people. One of the other reasons why we wear clothes is because it beautifies us. It attracts people to us. Haya is also this. Haya results in character development. Haya results in those other fada'il and those other merits being generated within you. Another hadith from our sixth Imam where he says, "La imana liman la haya lahu," that a person who doesn't have haya has no faith, has no piety, because a lack of faith, a lack of haya results in a lack of faith. Because haya, this quality which is there, it goes and prevents us from committing those indecent acts. And if a person can go and prevent themselves from indecent acts, they're able to go up in faith. But if a person cannot prevent themselves from going and committing those base desires, what happens? The iman, it begins to diminish. Haya, not only is it something which is important for our iman, it's important for insaniyah. If you want to know that quality, that attribute which defines human beings, is haya, is being modest, is being chaste. A person who doesn't have haya, they are more resembling to a human being than they are more resembling to an animal than they are to a human being. Haya is a sign of a human being. Haya is a sign that a person has some decency which is within them. There's a beautiful hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Where he says, لو كان الحياة صورة, if haya was a form, a structure, a person, a human being, لكان الحسين عليه السلام, then haya would have been embodied in the character and the personality of Imam Hussain. And the reason is because when it comes to some form of indecency, a person gets repulsed by it. And this haya is what prompted Imam Hussain to stand up against Yazid. When Imam Hussain saw what Yazid was doing to Islam, he was completely repulsed to it. The impetus for Imam Hussain standing up was this haya, was this ghaira which was there, which the Imam, he couldn't tolerate that the final religion of Islam, which is brought by the Prophet, is being completely destroyed. And the defining quality of Yazid is what? The defining quality of Yazid is waqaha, is insolence, is indecency, this quality of being attracted to those things which are abhorrent. A person who doesn't have haya, doesn't have iman, doesn't have Islam, that person doesn't have even a trace of humanity. When the head of Imam Hussain was brought to Yazid, there was a delegation there. And this delegation of people who were there included some people from the Roman Empire. A dignitary, a representative from the Roman Empire was there. And so when they were there in that gathering, the head of Imam Hussain was brought there. And so that dignitary that was there asked him, Ya Malik al-Arab, O King of Arabs, Hada ra'su man, this head, who does it belong to? And so Yazid replied to him, says, Malaka wali hadha ras. What does this head which is here in this tray, what does it have to do with you? You know, it's none of your business. It's some internal issue that we had and we resolved it. It has nothing to do with you. So the dignitary, he says that when I go back to Rome and I see the king, he's going to ask me about every single thing which took place when I was on this trip. And so I would like to know who this head belongs to, so I can go and I can tell the king. And so Yazid replied to him by saying that this is the head of Hussain ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. This head that is there in front of us, it belongs to Imam al-Hussain, the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And then he says, Man ummuhu? Who is the mother of this person? And so Yazid says, Fatima. And then he asks Fatima, Man? Fatima, the daughter bint Man. Fatima, the daughter of who? And then he says, Fatima bint Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. This man who was from Rome, he gets up and he looks at Yazid with disgust. He says, Uffin laka wala dinik. He said, woe to you and woe to your religion. Li dinun ahsan min dinikum. I have a religion and my religion is better than the religion that you follow. And then he says, Inna abi min hawafid Dawood. That my father is among the descendants of Nabi Dawood alayhi salam. Wa bayni wa baynuhu aba kathira. And between me and Nabi Dawood, there are many, many, many generations between me and Nabi Dawood. But the Christians, what do? وَالنَّصَارَ يُعَذِّمُونِ The Nasara, the Christians, they come to me, they honor me, and they respect me. To the point where they come and they collect the dirt which is beneath my feet, and they take it as a blessing because of my forefather Nabi Dawood. وَأَنْتُمْ تَقْتَلُونَ إِبْنَ بِنْتَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ وَمَا بَيْنَ نَبِيِّكُمْ إِلَّا وَاحِدَةً. But you go and you kill a person, you go and you kill the grandson of the Prophet that you believe in when there's only one gap, which is the daughter of Rasulullah. He says, Uffin lakum, woe to you and woe to your religion. How dare you go and you commit such a crime to someone who you believe and someone who you follow? What sort of a follower are you and what sort of a religion do you follow? And then he continues, he says that, have you heard about the church of the Huf? And Yazid says, no. He says there's a church on an island in the middle of the ocean, and it belongs to the Christians. And in this church, the Christians, they come there, and in this church they put their diamonds and their emeralds and their rubies, and they go and they do worship and other acts of obedience there. In that church, the reason why that church is called the Church of Huf is because in that church, in the middle of that church, there is a golden box. And in that golden box lies the hoof of the donkey that Nabi Isa used to ride upon. And he says the Christians, they come from all around the world to go and do ziyarah, to go and do pilgrimage to that place. And so they walk around that place and they weep and they cry. Why? Because that hoof of the donkey, it's associated with who? With Nabi Isa alayhi salam. And he said, how dare you go and kill the grandson of the Prophet? He says, Allah doesn't bless you, nor does Allah Bless your religion. At this point, Yazid, he became infuriated. He was filled with anger, and he told his people around him that go and kill this Christian man. And so when this Christian man, when he heard this, he began to smile. And he says, just wait one moment. He said, last night, I saw your prophet in my dream. And your prophet is telling me congratulations and welcome to Jannah. He said, I saw this dream of your prophet in my dream, and I'm thinking to myself that I am not a Muslim. I have never prayed. I have never fasted. I've never even read the Quran. But he came into my dream and he's welcoming me into Jannah. He says, now I understand why he came into my dream. At the head of Imam Hussain, he does taslim. He says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. He gets up, he jumps towards the head. He gets up and he springs towards the head of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain, and he is killed at the head of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain. This quality that he had within him was what? Was haya. This shamefulness in this act which is completely filled with repulsion. The grandson of Rasulullah being killed, he had this repulsion, he had this dislike for it. And what did it result in? It resulted in him accepting Islam. For a moment, he allowed this haya to be activated, even though he comes from a very prominent position, but that didn't stop it. Why? Because haya is a part of insaniya. Haya is a part of humanity. So what does he do? He sees this crime, this horrible crime which has happened, this brutal crime against Imam Hussain, and he goes and he submits to Islam at the head of Abi Abdullah al-Hussain. Brothers and sisters, tonight we send our salams to Abi Abdullah. We send our salams to the head of Abi Abdullah. We send our salams to the head that was detached from the body of Abi Abdullah. We send salams to Abi Abdullah and his head that was severed by the arteries, the head which was placed in front of a tyrant. In Ziyarat Jamia Kabira, we recite, Assalamu alayka salamul arifi bihurmatik. We send our salams to you, O Hussain, from those who have your recognition of your sanctity. We send salams to you, O Hussain, and we know your sanctity, we know your hurma, and we never violate it. Al-mukhlisi fi wilayatik. We send salams to you, O Hussain, from those who are sincere in your wilaya. Al-mutaqarribi ilallahi bi muhabbatik. We send salams to you, O Hussain, from those who seek nearness to Allah through your love. Al-bari'i min a'daik. We send salams to you from those who are far and disassociated with your enemies. Salamun man qalbuhu bimusabika makru. Salams to your head, O Abu Abdullah. From who? From us, from those who are mourners, from those weepers whose hearts are wounded because of what befell upon you, what befell upon your family and your companions. Ya Abu Abdullah, your tragedy is so great that our hearts are wounded. Our hearts are in pain and agony. If you want to see a wounded heart, brothers and sisters, come to Imam Sajjad. Come to Imam Sajjad's wounded heart. For 40 years, Imam Sajjad would cry for Abi Abdullah. Whenever food was placed in front of Imam Sajjad, Imam would cry and weep so much that the entire food would be filled with his tears. Somebody came to the Imam and said to the Imam and criticized the Imam, for how long will you cry for your father Abi Abdullah? Imam says to him, Wayhak, oh woe to you, Inna Yaqub ibn Ishaq ibn Ibrahim, Kana Nabiyyan ibn Nabi, that Yaqub was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dhahaba basaru min al-buka wa ibnuhu hayyun fi dar al-dunya. Nabi Yaqub had 12 sons, and one of his sons went missing, and this son of his was still alive. And then he says about himself, Wa naraytu abi wa akhi wa sab'ata ashara min ahli bayti sar'a maqtulin fakayfa yanqadhi huzni wa yadhhabu bukai. He says, do you know that 17 Yusufs from my family were slaughtered mercilessly in front of me? Do you know how they were killed? Do you know how they treated my father Abi Abdullah? Do you know how they treated the grandson of Rasulullah? Do you know that my father was killed while being hungry and thirsty, and then there was a river next to him? Do you know that my father's body was trampled by the horses? Do you know that my father's body was left uncovered on the sands of Karbala? Do you know that my father's body was left under the scorching sun? Do you know that the enemies, they came and they burned the tents of the lady and the woman? Do you know that the belongings that we had, they came and they stole them from us? Do you know that they tied us up like criminals and fugitive? Do you know that they mistreated our women and children, and they beat us and they humiliated us? Do you know the women, what they did to them? They came and they poked and prodded them with sticks and spears. They came and they removed their hijab. We send salams to Abi Abdullah. وَدَمْعُهُ إِنْدَ ذِكْرِكَ مَسْفُوء. Salam to you, O Abu Abdullah, from those lovers whose tears fall in remembering you. Whenever we remember Abi Abdullah, it causes this change within our hearts, from our eyes in Abdullah. Hazim to Abi Abdullah, those who are filled with anguish and grief because of the crimes that have befallen Abu Abdullah. Assalamu ala al-juyub al-mudarrajat. Salam to you, O Hussain. O Hussain, whose body and chest and limbs are trampled and crushed by the hooves of horses. Assalamu ala shafah al-dhabilat. Salam to you, O Hussain. O salam to you, O Hussain, upon those dried and parched lips of yours. O Hussain, your children and your loved ones and your companions were denied even a drop of water when there was a river next to you. We send salams on those dried lips of Abi Abdullah. Assalamu ala al-adsad al-ariyat. Salam to you, O Hussain, and on those bare bodies of the shuhada that lie on the sands of Karbala. The enemies, they didn't even have the decency to cover the bodies of the shuhada. They come and they strip whatever they can find from the body of Abi Abdullah. But the haya of Imam Hussain is so much that when he's going to the battlefield, he goes and he asks the women, he says to them, "Atuni bi thawbin la yurghab fi." Come and bring me a piece of cloth which no one will strip away from me, so that the body of the Imam will remain covered and be not bare. Assalamu ala al-jusum al-shahibat. Salam to you, O Hussain, and your companions whose lifeless bodies lie on the plains of Karbala. Assalamu ala ad-dima as-sa'ilat. Salam to you, O Hussain, on that blood which is flowing from your cuts and wounds. Assalamu ala al-a'dha al-muqatta'at. Salam upon you, O Hussain, on those dismembered and scattered body parts of yours. Assalamu ala al-ru'us al-mushalat. Salam to you, O Hussain, and the head of yours which was raised on a spear. Wassalamun ala al-Hussain, wa shimr jalisun ala sadrik. Salam be upon you, O Hussain, when that mal'un came to you, when that mal'un sits on your chest. Wa mulighun sayfuhu ala nahrak. O Hussain, salams upon you when that mal'un runs his sword at your throat. Qabidun ala shaybatik. Salams upon you, O Hussain, when that accursed enemy grabs your beard and exposes your neck. Dhabihun laka bi Muhammad. Salam to you, O Hussain, when he slaughtered you with his sword. Salam upon you, O Hussain, qad sakanat hawasuk. Salam to you, O Hussain, when your bodily senses come to a stop. Wa khafiyat anfasuk. Salam to you, O Hussain, when your breathing ceases. Salam upon you, O Hussain. Wa rufi'u ala qanati ra'asuk. Salam to you, O Hussain, where your head is detached and decapitated and put on a spear. Wa salamun alayhi yawman walid wa yawma yamutu wa yawma yub'athu hayya. Ala la'natullahi ala qawmi adh-dhalimin. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. السلام عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعل الله الآخر عهدي مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. صلوات الله محمد وعلى محمد.
خیلی ممنون خیلی ممنون ان شاء الله خداوند لذت بده
احسنتم شكرا جزيلا